Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today I am going to be reviewing Local Wonders: Seasons in the Bohemian Alps by Ted Kooser. This is a short collection that is divided into seasons. I didn't really know what I was getting into when I checked this out of the library. It seemed to be a collection of little musings of life living in Nebraska, so I checked it out and I decided to read it. For those of you not familiar with the geography of the United States, Nebraska is a state right smack in the middle of the United States. So there it is. If you aren't familiar with where it is, Ted Kooser lives there and he was writing about what life is like to live in Nebraska. I checked it out and I gave it a read and I am so glad that I did. So Ted Kooser, as mentioned, lives in Nebraska, and I have not read anything by him before, but I feel like he perfectly and beautifully captures what life is like to live in a small town or in rural Midwest America, which is a very hyper-specific demographic, I feel like, but there are millions of people who do live in the Midwest of the United States, and as a result, I feel like a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this. I didn't know what to expect going in, but I was very, very impressed with Ted Kooser's writing. I feel like his prose was really beautiful. That's really the only way that I can describe it, tinged with a little bit of optimism. So you have a little bit of nostalgia, you have some optimism, you have some musings about life, you have remembrances, and it all comes together in this really perfect, slender volume that I think anyone who has lived in the Midwest of the United States can relate to and will really, really enjoy. Now, I'm not one who talks about beautiful prose, or I'm not writing exactly for a book review column, so I have no reason to kind of be excessive with my praise, but I really think this was a very well written book and it highly exceeded my expectations. I was expecting a few quick musings or some notes of living in Nebraska, but it wound up just being a really enjoyable read, and again, I think a lot of people would really, really enjoy it. I wanted to read something from the preface, which I feel like just the first line of the preface actually, which I feel like just encapsulates his writing style, but also kind of shows the way it can connect to a reader who has very, very specific memories. So it says, contrary to what out-of-state tourists might tell you, Nebraska isn't flat but slightly tilted, like a long church basement table with the legs on one end not perfectly snapped in place. Not quite enough of a slant for the tuna and potato chip casserole to slide off into the Missouri River, which is just such a hyper-specific table of those hyper-specific memory of being in a church basement with tables that had the legs that snap up, which just feels like something that you don't expect to be able to connect to, but somehow can connect to. And I feel like this book is filled with little events that you may have not realized that you were connected to or that had a place in life. I feel like Ted Kooser focuses on the little things in life, and those are the little things that make life. So I feel like when you think about life, you think about the big things, the big birthdays, the jobs, the promotions, the marriage, the birth of kids, people dying, but Ted Kooser really focuses on the little things that are the things that we take with us through our lives and that make our lives meaningful. And that's why I think he just does such a good job in his book, and it was such a pleasure to read. This book, as I mentioned before, is split into seasons, and you can tell which season it is by the side, and the sections that he's writing in are really small, separated by this leaf. So as you can see, this section's small, this section kind of goes on to the next page, but none of them are longer than a couple pages, which makes it really easy to stop and start. You can read a couple sections, put the book down, and return to it, which is what I did over the course of like a week or two. So I was able to really savor this book. Something else that I really appreciated about this book, which just felt like small observations about life being lived in Nebraska, was the optimistic tone that the author took. So I've read some other books that are kind of observations about life, and this life could be taking place literally anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the Midwest America, but I feel like there is a genre where people sit and write about the daily little things of life and the way they feel about it. And those writings can take a wide variety of tones. I tend to be a very optimistic person. I tend to look on the bright side of life. I tend to be able to find joy and contentment in a lot of things and a lot of little things, which is maybe why this book resonated so much with me, because Ted Kooser also writes, in my opinion, with a very optimistic tone. Even when discussing things that are true challenges or true struggles that he went through, he talks about in here a bout that he went through in life where he had cancer, but even with cancer, he maintained an optimistic outlook while being very realistic about the challenges and the fear that he had when facing this challenge in life. So I feel like he remains realistic about the challenges that he faces or things people go through, while also maintaining that optimistic outlook. I feel like sometimes people think people who are optimists are unrealistic, which I do not think is true at all. You can definitely be realistic and optimistic. Those are things that are they're compatible with each other. I don't think I'm unrealistic as a person, but I do think I'm very optimistic as a person. And I really dislike people who say I'm a realist, because what that really means is they're a pessimist, but they are claiming that the pessimism is the only way to see the world. Nothing encapsulates my feeling on that more than comparing this book, Local Wonders, to a book that was actually the first book that my book club that I meet with read, and that was another book called The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, which I really disliked. John Green wrote in The Anthropocene Reviewed about also little musings on life or little things that he has gone through in life. And it was funny, there were some funny moments, but overall the book had a pessimistic tone. And the book also had this feeling that if you were not also pessimistic, you were somehow not being realistic. You weren't facing the challenges in life. You weren't recognizing that things need to be changed. And I don't think like looking at something and realizing you want to change something in your life doesn't mean you have to be pessimistic about that either. John Green talks about the way that we are exploiting the earth and the way that we aren't treating the earth the way that we should, but he takes that pessimistic tone where if you aren't horribly concerned about this, as in if you aren't not able to sleep about this, if you aren't waking up in the middle of the night in dread over this, then you are somehow not realistic, and we can't be optimistic about this. As an optimist might say that there are ways to overcome this, and there's things we can do about it, which you can argue whether or not either of those positions are true or false, but I don't think that the feeling I got when reading The Anthropocene Reviewed was that you had to be pessimistic to view life realistically, and there was no room for optimism really in life. That was really the takeaway I got from that book. This book talks about challenges, talks about things people go through, talks about struggles, but has this view, I feel like Ted Kooser has this view that ultimately life is beautiful, life is something to be celebrated, and not just the big events like weddings, birthdays, holidays, but the little things in life are to be celebrated too, and those are the things that make life beautiful, and he has this optimistic view on the world, which I really, really appreciate. So my rating is like between a 4 and 5 star. Some of the sections I read are probably more of a 4 star. Some of the sections I read are more of a 5 star. So it depends on which section, and because the sections could be really small, it's kind of hard to have an overall aggregated rating for the book. But I think this is a book that everyone should check out of the library or purchase if you want to purchase it and read, because I think there's something that will connect with everyone in there, and at the very least it's just an optimistic outlook on life, and it just kind of aligns with the way that I view life. So I really enjoyed this book. If you've read this book or anything else by Ted Kooser, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear it. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.